you know, it's live online, so it's not
talk to the
it doesn't
camera or do
matter.
we talk to each other?
Either one. No, either one, because we're live.
No cuss words or limited cuss words?
Limited.
No F-bombs.
Yeah,
F-bombs.
the guy who likes to drop cuss words tells us to not cuss.
It only
No
happens
cuss
twice.
words. Well, there won't be any cuss words because you're not on
Yeah,
camera this time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Then I say all that, and then, you know, Wes is
gonna
going to
let
say
it
something that's going to
slip.
shock
Well,
me.
shit.
Oh, just get it over with. Just get it over with.
All right, here we go.
That's not a real cuss word, is it? All right, we're live
We're live.
on both of them? Maybe.
Yes.
Maybe. All right. We're live. Gun Talk Live. Thank you for joining us on YouTube and Facebook. And if you like it, share it. Tell your friends and coworkers. It's free. It's okay. Everyone can come in here. As you'll notice with me today is not Kevin Jarnigan. Although he's a...
Boo!
Yeah.
Yay!
And the whole crowd's like, yes! No KJ today. We've got Wes Doss with us. Wes is, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me here.
You come in, he's coming to town to help us do some first-person defender episodes. We've been talking it up a little bit lately. And we thought we'd just kind of pick your brain and talk guns and tactical training and, you know, I don't know, arresting naked people or whatever, you know, other stories we have.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I understand we've got a family, a friendly audience, so I got to keep it down to adult
Somewhat,
hours.
yeah. It's basically just people who are pretending to work. They're watching us right now, and their bosses are in the next room. It's kind of, you know, secret viewing.
So this would be safe if somebody walked in and caught them watching it then.
Yeah, this is research or something like that, right?
Got it.
For whatever your job is. So Wes, for people who don't know what you do, explain your background.
Well, I'm both law enforcement and military. Done 2 careers, retired out of both. Still have an active role in law enforcement, and I spend most of my time here either in the States or abroad training primarily law enforcement and military, but to a degree also quite a few responsible citizens around the country.
Yeah. Well, I thought that, you know, you've been doing it for so long. I find that in this industry, I've gotten to meet more people with military background and law enforcement background than you would in most areas of, you know, when I used to work in regular, just, you know, Fox television, you know. But you guys always have a lot of stories. And I when I was like 16 years old and somebody said, you know, what are you going to do after graduating high school? And you go to college, and some people go into the military. At the time, I'll be honest, I was like, military? That just sounds like I'm going to be yelled at and maybe shot at. That doesn't sound that great. And then now, looking back, I'm like, man, all the stories these guys have. They got to do stuff that, like, no one could afford to do and go places and all this stuff. I mean...
Well, yeah, and some people pay big bucks to get yelled at and screamed at, too.
Right,
So, I mean, there's that crowd as well.
But now I look back and I'm like, actually, that would have been pretty awesome. But I didn't have that attitude or I guess maybe knowledge when I was younger.
Everybody's experiences are a little bit different, though. You know, a lot of people have very positive experiences when they're in the military, and some people, just by the virtue of who they are and what they've done or didn't do, have pretty negative experiences, just like pretty much any other career field.
Yeah, it's not fair to say like you're just going to get yelled at when you get into the military.
Well, there's plenty of getting yelled
maybe
at.
at first.
At first, yeah.
Yeah.
It just depends what your job is. Yeah.
So you've been traveling around the country. What you been doing lately?
Actually, I've been here in the great state of Louisiana here for the last week, doing counter ambush training for a number of agencies, just the other side of New Orleans. And since the first of the year, we've been on the road pretty steadily with the LSL tour.
Now, you know, counter ambush. This is specific to law enforcement.
Yeah, that class is specific. I've actually had a handful of requests here recently where they've asked about it on the civilian side. And it's just not quite yet a curriculum that I'm ready to have go outside of just the guys that are getting caught in these ambushes. At some point in time, there'll be a different version of it.
Right.
But for right now, it's a dedicated LE program.
I mean, this is something that seems to have popped up more in the last, I don't know, couple of years of people ambushing police officers.
Well, you know, yeah, and whether it's that there's been an enhanced value placed on law enforcement officers as targets, or it's just public dissent, or whatever the case may be, there has been a rash of these over the last few years, and just by the sheer nature of the job, there's times each day or night that lend you to being caught in a situation where you are unaware and caught in the middle of a spontaneous ambush.
So how do you go about developing a curriculum for that? Because I mean, that's different than let's just talk about shooting targets on the range, I imagine.
Yeah, we took a hard look at it, and it wasn't that we were looking at other people's programs and saying, well, that's completely irrelevant or we don't want to do it that way. There's a lot of really good vehicle-related programs that are out there. There's a number of very qualified instructors that do them, and to their credit, they classify those classes strictly as vehicle close quarters classes. And that's exactly what they are. They're designed to be vehicle close quarters classes. We looked at it from what really happens and who's being involved in the situation, and that is the patrol officer. It isn't a Bearcat full of SWAT guys that's getting ambushed. It's usually a lone guy sitting by himself.
Right.
And then in the course of LSL, we asked a lot of questions. I would ask, of departments, how many of you run two-man units versus single-man units? Well, the overwhelming number is still single-man units. So, okay, great. Then how many of you have rifles issued to you? And still it's only about 50% have rifles. And then, well, you guys that have long guns, where are those long guns at? Well, they're in a box in the trunk of my car.
So it's kind of you're thinking through this for them, perhaps, right? Maybe they're just doing what they've always done just because that's the way they've always done it. I mean, now you're going, well, maybe there's a new way to do this?
Well, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get them to think critically about what they're doing and why they're doing it. Law enforcement, military, civilian sector, the consumer swing to one direction or another is the same regardless. And we've had a swing towards rifles and we've had a swing towards different types of tactics. And the reality is, if your rifle is in a trunk, you're not going to get out of the car to go to the trunk to get back in the car to shoot somebody through the windshield of your car. That makes no sense.
No.
But that's how a lot of programs start and finish. Everything starts and stops with two guys ripping the windshield apart in their car. So we were focusing on what happens when you're trapped inside that vehicle, getting out of that vehicle, working away from that vehicle, and dealing with it as a come-as-you-are affair.
Yeah.
Which is essentially, if it isn't within arm's reach when the situation starts to unfold, it doesn't exist when you're in the middle of the fight.
Well, for us and our audience, people who are gun enthusiasts, concealed carry, I think about how we'll go to a class with our full-size M&P, our full-size Glock 17, and then they put on a J-frame to carry.
Right.
It's like, you're not really fighting with your Glock 17, probably. Most times. Most people aren't carrying that.
No, and I'll be honest with you, I carry religiously, and 99.9% of the time, of course, I live in Arizona where it's hotter than hell most of the year. I have a Ruger LCR that I carry. I don't carry a full-size gun because I'm in a pair of board shorts and flip-flops most of the year. I love the adage that this pistol on my hip is just for me to fight to get to my rifle with. And it's like, well, good luck with that.
Right.
Because if you're already there, the fight's already there. You can't call it timeout.
Right.
You'll run to your trunk of your car.
Maybe it's going to start and end with what you have or don't have.
Most definitely. It'll start and end just exactly the way it is.
Yeah. The whole my fight thing, it always is interesting and amusing to me because I think people who are interested in self-defense, concealed carry, they take some classes maybe. I think they run through scenarios a little bit here and there, sitting in a restaurant or I'm driving my car, I'm stopped at a stoplight, you think through it. But I think a lot of times the whole my fight, they imagine it going a certain way, and like if I'm fighting my way to my rifle that I keep in my truck thing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it may not go that way.
Well, and that's the thing to always think about. It's not just a law enforcement thing, it's a civilian thing as well, because people are people. Where do you think your attention's at when you're doing something? Well, I'm a multitasker. Well, with a guy with a psychology background, I'm telling you that's an impossibility. Humans aren't multitaskers. You can switch your attention from task to task, but you can only focus on a single task at a time.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting in a restaurant talking to your wife or your girlfriend, or you're yelling at your kids because they're making a mess on the table, where do you think your attention is at when something walks in the door? You're having to catch up to what's taking place, which means there's a lot of things you're going to have to work through in order to actually get either involved in that fight or get away from that fight. You can't walk into it like you're on the range. The target's standing in front of you and you're waiting for the buzzer to go off and you go to your gun. That creates a really unrealistic expectation on the way things are going to play out.
What do you think? What do you think some of the mistakes people make when they think about this stuff, or when they're training, when they're on the range practicing?
It really comes down to the two biggest drawbacks are anticipation and expectation. That we value all the things, that how fast we can be out of the holster, how fast we can put hits on target, and we walk away patting ourselves in the back like, wow, we really got something accomplished. Well, you're building blocks. You are getting something accomplished, but that doesn't necessarily equate to what you're going to do when you're in an actual fight. Because again, you have to wait. You're literally having to wait till something has happened. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, you're not drawing your gun because somebody looks weird.
Absolutely. No, absolutely not. And I learned this a long time ago. You can't judge books by their cover. There's a lot of really weird or strange looking people out there that are perfectly normal people.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of people that look like upright standing, you know, people that are thugs on the inside.
Right.
So you really can't judge any of that. You just have to just do the best you can. But when a fight happens, it's going to be very spontaneous. And it's going to catch you, even if you're looking right at it, it's still going to be spontaneous.
I remember my dad talking about, and it was probably a discussion he had with some other trainer guy, but kind of your biases could get you injured or hurt or killed. You know, you think the threat is going to be a certain color person, or it's going to be a male and not a female, or whatever. You got to do your best to kind of erase that crap out of your head.
Absolutely.
Right. Some woman walking up to you at night or knocking on your door, you know, are you more likely to open the door for her? Probably so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it may be to your detriment.
Well, yeah, and again, I think it's at some point in time we're all kind of, whether it's influenced by popular media, movies, stories, you know, some of the movies and stuff that we grew up with, that you're probably influenced by a lot of those images that you've seen that kind of make you biased, or even your family culture makes you a little bit biased. You know, you're told stories about people by your parents, your grandparents. So you're, you know, watch out for this person over there, watch out for people that are dressed like this. Well, yeah, they're probably right about 50% of the time, but you can't judge 100% of the world that way.
Well, TV and movies, right? I mean, how much does that influence people and what they think is going to happen? And you know, also, it greatly influences the public's opinion on what a police officer should have done, or a concealed carry person should have done, could have done. Well, you could have done this. You know, you could have shot him in the knee.
Right.
Like, give me a break.
Right.
Okay, that just, you know, you're watching too many movies, and you know you're using that as your fact of what's going to happen here.
Oh, right, absolutely. Now, it's the same thing happens on the nonviolent side. People are so influenced by what they see. I can remember, you know, either as a patrol officer or as a detective showing up at somebody's house that got broken into, and it's a vacation home. They haven't been here for 9, 10, 11 months, you know, so they have no idea when the house got broken into, when the TVs got stolen. And where we're at, there's so much alkali in the air on the ground that literally you can find a fingerprint, but if you're not super gentle with it, you can literally destroy it because it's gotten so crusty, the oil changes. And so finding and drawing latent prints are difficult. They think after watching CSI that you've got this machine that's in the trunk of your car and you drop that print card in and it's going to spit out suspect information, address, the whole 9 yards.
Right, go get them.
And they're like, well, you can't find them? I'm trying, but it's just not that easy.
Yeah. What else do you find that people, as far as, you know, citizens who are not law enforcement, what do they not know or not understand about, you know, dealing with law enforcement, and also thinking about people who are concealed carry? What should they know when, you know, dealing with law enforcement, whether that's getting pulled over or, you know, police officer knocking at your door, you know, what's going on the police officer side that they may not realize?
I think probably the most important thing that people need to realize, that many of them fail to realize, is that the officer's exposure to you as a lawful carrier of a firearm, CCW, CHL, whatever your state calls it, is so infrequent that it really doesn't happen. And simply by virtue of the requirements, the training, and everything else that goes into the want of wanting to carry concealed, that crowd tends to be a relatively responsible group of people, you know, who aren't just simply going to go to guns on people. So the number of shootings or the number of self-defense related situations that a civilian has gotten involved into is a fraction.
Yeah.
You know, I might go to 100 robbery calls. I might go to 100 crimes against people calls in a year, domestic violence calls, robberies, whatever. And I gain a certain level of on-the-job experience from that. I may not deal with somebody like you for 5, 10 years.
Right.
And how do I deal with that if I just don't have that level of familiarity? So there's always going to be mistakes that are being made. The other side of it is they assume, since there's a statute has been created, that everybody in uniform must understand that statute.
Oh, yeah.
I've got a criminal code book that I have to be intimate with that's almost 2 inches thick. That's our revised statutes in our state. Then I've got a traffic code that's equally thick. Then because I was a county officer, I've also got our wildlife and game management stuff. I've got an MDT, a laptop, I've got a license plate reader, I've got a radio in my vehicle, I've got gear that I have to be familiar with, I've got a vehicle I have to be familiar with, I've got city ordinances I have to be familiar with, all this stuff going on, and all of a sudden now I've got to figure out how I deal with a lawful firearms carrier.
Yeah.
So it's not right, it's not wrong, but it's just the same direction of understanding needs to go both ways. The question I always ask people, because it starts a very fevered conversation many times, is rather than stand here and complain about what you think law enforcement's going to do to you, what have you actually done to try and educate local law enforcement? Because there's just another layer of training that needs to take place. And quite honestly, it really doesn't take place on our side because it just doesn't happen that often.
Right. It was something that was brought up a little while ago because there were some incidents of there's more good guys with guns out there than there probably ever have been, perhaps.
Absolutely.
With the growth of concealed carry. And I think, God, there's a lot of states that you don't even need a permit anymore. I think it's 10 or 12 states now that have that constitutional carry. So who knows how many people are actually carrying. I know that we talked about it on Gun Talk Radio, is how do we educate law enforcement that man with a gun doesn't mean bad guy?
Right.
You know, or training, when you're training law enforcement, you know, when a trainer says gun and then they all draw and shoot.
Right.
It's like, whoa, you know. Right. I understand the goal, and maybe it's just like saying him when we're talking about people or something like that, but like this is a new wrinkle for law enforcement too to have to deal with.
Absolutely. And it's not just law enforcement dealing with civilians, it's law enforcement to law enforcement. I myself was involved in a situation that happened off duty, and I was attacked. I do a late night diaper run when our second daughter was born, and I run to the store. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and the Muzak is playing, and they're stocking shelves.
Right.
And I hear this, "Hey, Detective Doss, do you remember me?" voice come out of nowhere, and boom, suddenly the fist fight's on.
Really?
And by the time the local guys showed up, they didn't know who anybody was. Now, automatically, I see them, I think the cavalry's here. Well, I got treated just like a criminal in that until they realized who I was.
Really, yeah.
Because they come in, it's an emotionally charged set of circumstances, and the last thing I want to have happen is I don't want to get shot.
Right.
So there has to be a certain amount of understanding going both ways that, hey, I don't know you when I show up, and I've got to quickly make sense out of this situation. So rather than complain and rather than assume I'm going to abuse you, help me make sense out of this.
Yeah.
You know, assist in making sense out of this.
Well, it's a debate because people will say if you're in some sort of, I guess it's whether it's a shooting or even just any kind of thing, the cops show up, don't say anything, just say I want my lawyer. Maybe that's good advice in certain ways, but it feels kind of confrontational, like you're not working with law enforcement in some ways. I don't know. I've also heard another idea as far as not standing there with a gun when the police show up is, can you remove yourself out of a situation, not flee the scene, but say, you know, get on the phone and go, look, I'm 200 feet, I'm a half block down. I'm standing here, I'm wearing these clothes, this just happened, but I didn't want to hang out outside of the ATM machine with a gun in my hand or be there when the police roll up. You know, I'm over here, I'm across the street or whatever, as far as, you know, in the goal of not getting shot.
Well, the best way is, you know, a couple of things always happen, and unless you are just an absolute stone cold individual. And people get, again, it's a very emotionally charged set of circumstances. You were just in conflict with somebody. And you know what it feels like when you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off and then they come back and the finger comes out the window and, you know, it looks like they're trying to antagonize you. Your heart rate goes up, and that's a mild emotionally charged set of circumstances. Right. You just got in a full-blown conflict with somebody. Slow yourself down a little bit, try within the best you can, and not only tell them what happened over the phone, but tell them who you are and what you're dressed like.
Yeah.
And make sure you know I am armed, but I've already reholstered, or I've done this, or I'm holding the suspect at gunpoint, but this is me. I'm the one in the brown jacket.
I'm the good guy.
I'm the good guy.
Yeah.
And expect for them to do a little yelling and screaming when they show up, but it should begin to de-escalate.
Yeah, so don't be offended because, you know, when they show up, they don't, like you said, they don't know what's going on.
Right.
They have to sort it out. Even if you say you're the good guy, they deal with a lot of liars, perhaps. They may have you know. It's not unreasonable to say you might get arrested for a little bit, or you might get detained, or whatever you want to, however you want to put it. You got any questions, KJ?
Yeah, Rick Rasnick says, I've been told by a local cop that if I get pulled over, keep my hands at 9 and 3 and identify myself as having a CCW and where my gun is located. Go.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes and no. 9 and 3, 10 and 2, but keep your hands where they can be seen. And there's that natural tendency, because like I said earlier on, I'm probably the most aggressive driver that's out there. I'll already have my registration and everything in my hands by the time my car comes to a rest. But if you've already stopped the car, just don't start moving around the inside of the cab of the vehicle. You're creating an element of suspicion.
It looks weird, yeah.
Wait till he comes up there and says, hey, do you have any idea why I stopped you? Said, yes, no, whatever the situation is. And if it's just to get a ticket, just get your ticket and drive on. If it's getting you out of the vehicle or something has gotten to change, at that point you definitely need to let them know, okay, just as I'm getting out of the car, I'm letting you know that I'm a CCW holder. I've got my gun on me. It's about where my wallet's at, so I don't want to reach for it.
Don't reach for it to show them.
But explain it to them, you know, and calmly and as civilly as you can possibly do it, because you're trying to build a rapport. And
Sure.
just as the officer's trying to build a rapport with you, build that rapport and then just work through the set of circumstances.
I've always had this came from a long time ago as a teenager. Some advice was basically, if you get pulled over, this sounds dramatic, but you are in a potential life and death situation. Mm-hmm. Now, you don't need to be totally freaked out, but you need to understand, you get pulled over, especially it could be worse at night. Police officer doesn't know who you are, mm-hmm. and you know obviously the police officer has a gun, whether you're carrying one or not.
Right.
I move slowly, do whatever you're told, and let them know that they start. Probably, I guess, after a few minutes, the officer gets a feel for, okay, this is just a regular citizen that ran a stoplight or whatever.
I think one of the biggest problems more than anything else is it's just the human side of that interaction. That, and probably where attorneys are probably right when they say don't tell them anything, it's don't get excited and just start spewing information, which is a nervous reaction to such set of circumstances. The officer needs to know who you are. They need to know what happened and are you okay? And that's pretty much the extent of what they need to know. What they're trying to stop is this nonstop just flow of this nervous information that's coming out, that it might be just some sort of expounding on things that don't need to be expounded on.
And emotional too.
Emotional.
I mean, you could say some stuff that just sounds bad, looks bad, and you didn't mean it to sound that way.
Exactly.
But you're amped up, like you said. You may have just been punched in the head 6 times, and you may be cursing at the guy that you just got in an altercation with, or who.
I know I would be.
But don't do what we were talking about earlier. This is a new one. We've talked about weird advice in concealed carry classes before. The advice given was, when you get pulled over while you're concealed carrying, make sure to hurry up and take your gun off and set it on the dash. When I heard this, I couldn't even speak. Wes, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's insanity. Again, you're in most states, you're lawfully required to identify yourself.
Right.
But there has to be a certain amount of common sense, which I realize is not common.
Ooh, yeah.
You ran a stop sign. You got a flickering taillight. You going 5 miles over the speed limit. 99% of those are nothing that will have you out of your vehicle. It's the 30 minutes that you're going to be there while they're filling out a citation or typing out a citation, and you're on your way. To whip out a pistol and lay it on the dashboard.
God.
And how that looks.
This is the worst thing ever.
That's the worst thing ever.
Please don't do this. This is really, really bad advice. Don't touch your gun. Don't show your gun. If you can say, hey, officer, here's my license and here's my concealed carry permit, and I do have a gun in the car with me, or whatever. The
one that I like is there's a video that was on social media. It was 2 guys in like one of the worst bad neighborhoods in either Chicago or Detroit, where they got pulled over and then they handcuffed themselves together to the steering wheel, and the cop was asking them, "What are you doing?" It says, "So you see our hands and you know we're not going to do anything. We handcuffed ourselves to the steering wheel." It's like,
That's bizarre.
Sure.
I mean, I would think if you were law enforcement, that would make you kind of go, wait a minute.
Exactly.
What's going on with these guys?
Of course, I live close to Las Vegas too, so I mean, you get
There's
things
some
like that
weird
all the
stuff.
time. Yeah.
So you've been military, you've been law enforcement, you've been a trainer for a long time. You've got to have some weird stories
Oh, yeah.
or some funny ones. I mean, does anything come to mind, or as far as whether it's this happened on the range and it was something we really learned from, or it was just goofy?
Wow, yeah, that's going to take a while to come up with all the real goofy ones. The one that I like the most, though, and it happens so frequently, is the guy who is the embodiment of a tactical gear catalog when he shows up on the range, the super tactical guy,
Right.
who immediately starts making very fundamental errors in the class, and whether that's something that he's learned or something that he's cultivated over time. And when you go to correct him, is in just complete and total deniability, which is what's cool to have, my wife who's a photographer there, so she walks back up with her camera and scrolls back through a couple
This
of
is
images,
what
says,
happened.
see finger on trigger, that's going to be a problem.
Right.
And they just sit in complete and total disbelief. I've had people actually write back and complain that somehow she was able to Photoshop that on the range from her camera. It's like, it happens. Just deal with it.
Probably, that's a good point. I would say that from talking to you and other trainers I know, ego has to be one of the biggest detriments or things holding you back when you go to do a training class.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and there's something about, and I mean, probably it's mostly males that you're teaching, and probably most of the problems are with males, I think. There's something about, I was born with a Y chromosome, so I must know how to shoot and hunt and run a gun. I must be an excellent driver, and I must know how to throw a ball or something.
Right.
It's like, it's okay. We're not all natural. I mean, I'm not a natural baseball player here, Get the ego out of the way so you can learn, right?
Yeah, but we see it all the time. Sometimes with the training trends, so the changes in training, particularly on that LE professional side, where there are certain things that we're almost mandated by case law to train on. So there's these set requirements, diminished light being one of them. And there's been a huge downplay of diminished light for the last couple of decades. What used to be this hot button thing when the Surefire Institute first came out and they were really going just gung-ho and they were creating curriculums that a lot of other organizations were using, it was at the top of everybody's list. And all of a sudden it just kind of just got downplayed.
So things are like in vogue for training?
I guess, yeah. But what we're seeing is guys can go out to the range and they can draw and come to ready and establish a shooting grip with either a weapons-mounted light or handheld light and shoot a target, then extinguish the light, put it back in the holster. But when you make them do that in a spontaneous atmosphere, you get lights on the grounds, you get lights that can't come on, you get lights that get taken out by the slides of pistols.
Oh, wow.
You have all kinds of things that go on because nobody's ever practiced that. And probably the most significant one, and we have hundreds and hundreds of images of this, even some video of it, is the guy that's picture perfect. I mean, he's got the presentation, he's doing all the breathing, he's a mimic of one of the celebrity trainers that's out there. And he snaps out to full extension, and his weapons-mounted light and his pistol goes off the front of his gun and ends up on the ground at his feet. Well, that's never happened before. I have a hard time believing that. And it's funny on the range when your gear's laying on the ground, but if you were trying to use that in a real-world set of circumstances to illuminate something in front of you and it's laying on the ground looking back at you, that's a potentially detrimental set of circumstances. It's not funny. You're just not that familiar with your gear.
Yeah.
And people just refuse at times to be familiar with their gear. We'll run a low-light class, and it's sometimes it's like pulling teeth. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, you have to. This is operating under these low light conditions. Well, it's kind of scary. It's dangerous when we do that. Well, being on the range is dangerous too.
Right.
And we've got all the safety already built into it.
You're going to have these controls in place.
Absolutely.
We're going to take it step by step.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. I don't want to do it because I'm not comfortable doing it. It's like, I'm good at running, and so that I don't want to do the other thing.
I was good with the training wheels on. I don't want to take them off.
Right. Yeah. How many people do you think carry a light or carry a weapon-mounted light?
I think it's become more in vogue, like you were saying. I live in and around, between two hubs for CCW and concealed carry, both for law enforcement and for civilians. Between the Phoenix metropolitan area and the greater Clark County, Las Vegas area, it's almost a fashion statement at times. There's so many Kydex manufacturers, so many guys tricking out pistols, so many guys putting different bolt-on accessories or finishes and everything else in their guns, and they're proud of what they carry. You see a lot of weapons-mounted lights on pistols. Major brands, off brands, and with a custom-made holster, it doesn't really matter. You're going to get it to whatever's going to fit your gear. But we'll get those folks on range many times, and they're fine as long as they're standing at a known distance in front of that one-dimensional piece of paper, and they're told when they can point at the paper, turn the light on, shoot the target, extinguish the light, put it back in the holster. When it becomes more of a spontaneous set of circumstances, it starts to fall apart. And that should be to them not an embarrassment. It should be, wow, I just had a wake-up call. I really need more time and more practice with these tools, because how much of your day involves diminished light?
Well, I also kind of feel like, and I get that there's a culture, a gun culture, maybe a bigger gun culture in like Arizona, where you go, I've got the cool holster and the cool gun and the cool weapon-mounted light and all this stuff. It's like, you know, what Grandpa will say about one of the new cars. Well, it's just more stuff to break.
Right.
You know? Well, I don't like electric windows. Well, I mean, but there's a good case for carrying a light on your gun, but it's one more thing that you're going to have to run, and, you know, have you practiced with it, used it, all that stuff.
Right. But, you know, the human eye and the brain require a certain amount of light to see depth and shadowing and all these things that tell us what's in front of us. Without all that, you're simply making an assumption about what you think you see or don't see. So I don't want to shoot the wrong person. I don't want to get into a situation where I'm putting rounds in the wrong location because I'm guessing at what I think I'm seeing in the dark.
Right. Yeah. So you've come in town for first-person Defender filming. You've done a bunch of episodes with us before, and it's always interesting what happens in these scenarios. You've had a few weird ones with us.
Yeah.
We had the guy who left his girlfriend in the middle of a mass shooting.
That's classic.
And just left her to die. And then we had the guy who tried to use you. You were just the trainer standing observing.
Just means a human shield.
Use you as a human shield. That was a good one.
Yeah.
I know you do a lot of force-on-force stuff, and it seems like it's such good training, but you also have weird stuff like that happen. I mean, I've heard of all kinds of stories of, you know, people walking into a room and shooting people who have their hands up. They're obviously the hostages, and they're just bang, 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 shooting everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to see that stuff.
We, for several years now, working with one of our industry partners, we've been a training group that's been highlighted at the Action Targets event up in Provo, Utah.
Right, big law enforcement event,
right? And if people don't know about LETC, they should, because it's really it's a good deal. It's phenomenal. Not just us, but all the other trainers that are up there. And we've done a force-on-force program up there for the last couple of years. And in years past, we didn't have to, but it was kind of what we were told we needed to use. Was this big giant action target shoot house that they have on the Utah County range.
Okay.
It's a big one of their probably the larger structures. And so, which really slows things down because you can only run so many people through at a time. And we've kind of changed that a little bit this last year. But a couple of years ago, I had a massive major metropolitan agencies training bureau came to LETC. Who had 6 or 7 members of their organization came.
These are the trainers that train all the other law enforcement.
Right. And this is an agency that has, this is a self-sufficient department. This is a department with a massive budget, huge training, huge, just lot call volume within that agency as well. So it's a captain, and I have the rest of the sergeants and officers that are assigned to that bureau. So I'm picking the captain's brain. And I said, do you guys do force-on-force training in your agency? Because I know it's still kind of, in some places, it's still considered kind of controversial. He goes, oh, yeah, 2-3 times a month. I said, wow.
That's a lot.
I said, that's a lot. Yeah, I said, the whole department? He goes, well, no, just the SWAT team. And I go, oh, what about patrol? He goes, maybe once a year, maybe once every other year. But it's usually that decision shoot that they have to do at the end of the year, and I have to push everybody through, so they're in there like a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, boom, and they got to get out, and somebody else has to come in. I said, well, okay. Well, who gets in more shootings, your SWAT team or your patrol officers? Oh, patrol. Okay, so you don't think maybe they need more time doing this? And he goes, where do you guys do your scenarios at? Oh, we have a shoot house exactly like this one. We do them all inside that shoot house. So where do most of your shootings take place? Oh, the last couple of years on the interstate. Do you ever do them around vehicles? No.
Right.
Okay. How do you start your scenarios? Oh, this is easy. And he points at the red line that's on the floor going into the shoot house. When the officer crosses that red line, they automatically know the scenario is live. Well, that really wasn't the question I asked, but that's the answer he gave. It's, and I've been in thousands of people's homes in the course of my job, for either reports or investigations or whatever, and I've yet to see this magical red glowing line
Right.
at the threshold of somebody's front door. So I said, hey, Cap, let me ask you a question. Would you be willing to be my first participant? He goes, yeah, sure. So I gear him up, head to toe, groin protector, chest protector, neck protector, Darth Vader helmet, gloves, give him a loaded Glock 17T, give him 2 fully loaded magazines. And the door is open, and we're looking down the hallway, and I said, okay, here's your scenario. That last door on the right, this big, massive hallway. I said, that's your RP, your reporting person. I said, it's a little old lady who has called here at least 3 times tonight, complaining about loud noise and music coming from the apartment next door to hers. She's upset. Go down there and make contact with her and see what happens. He's like, that's it? I go, that's it. As soon as he walks across that red line, out comes the gun. And he starts pieing off all the doorways. And, you know, the shoot house is take a beating. So he gets to one of the doors of one of the potentially other apartments, and it doesn't close fully any longer. So when he touches it, it opens. So now he's walking into somebody else's apartment. So I call the event. I bring him back, and I said, what are you doing? He goes, what? And I go, what are you doing in somebody else's apartment? Well, I had to make sure that everything was safe and secure. No, you're a loud music call. This could be a housing project. You have doors open, doors closed. You can't walk into somebody else's apartment. You have no purpose to be there. And I said, what's with the gun? He goes, what do you mean? I said, the gun. What's with the gun? He goes, what's a simunitions exercise? I said, it's a loud music call. He goes, well, no, it's a simunitions exercise. No, it's a loud music call. I said, do you teach people in your academy? Excuse me, ma'am. To understand you have a problem? Yeah, I didn't think so. Right? And so they're doing things in these training environments that they would never do in the real world.
Yeah.
Because somewhere deep in their psyche, they know none of this is real.
Right. And that's the problem.
And they lose grasp with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost one of those, and we run into this on the show, it's the challenge of trying to make it safe, make it feel real, and also let them, they don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, have them go down that hall 3 or 4 times, perhaps, if you have the time. That's always, it's sometimes time constraints and trying to run everybody through it.
Right, absolutely. Mix it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, when we set people up for scenarios, like even in our counter ambush program, you know, I'll tell everybody up front, you're only going to have a few rounds in your pistol. And they'll question that. Well, I'm only going to have 4 or 5 rounds? Maybe you won't have anything in your pistol. Don't count on having a gun that's going to work.
Right.
You know, don't plan on anything. It's spontaneous. Work. Get in there and work.
Yeah.
And when they know they don't have an unlimited number of rounds, when they know that they might get shot and they might not be able to shoot back, it tends to force them into working cover and concealment a lot more effectively than if they knew they had an unlimited number of rounds.
You might be the officer that I heard about that showed up for training, or the quals, showed up for quals, and took it out and to shoot a few rounds. Gun's unloaded. They unloaded the gun last year at the quals before they left the range. Put it in their holster. Been carrying an unloaded gun for a year.
Right. Yeah,
That's bad.
I did a training for a department back east, and where their protocol is when you come to the range for a simunitions event, that your live ammo and live gun go in the box that the sims gun comes out of, and they lock those all up in a locker so nobody can get at their live guns. That way they get their blue gun back, you get your real gun back when you leave.
Okay.
So we ran probably 100 people through the exercise over the course of that day, from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. And we're accounting for all the guns. There's 15 blue guns, there's 14 blue guns, and 1 live Glock. Somebody left, and it took a while based on serial numbers to figure out whose gun this belonged to. They finally found this guy who had gone home, shaved, showered, put on a uniform, and gone to work. And it was already into his shift by a couple of hours with a blue Glock 17T in his holster.
He's going to sting the hell out of somebody if he has to shoot him.
Absolutely.
Oh
But
my
the
gosh.
color blue didn't matter, and he just so didn't think about it.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, not all police officers are gunnies.
No.
They're not, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's just people go, oh, my friend who's a cop told me, you know, what gun to buy. Maybe he's the tackleberry of the department, perhaps, and he's super into it. But maybe it's just he's had one gun his entire life. It was the one that was issued.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we've had that. We've had guys that have come out and, you know, we used to run a conference out where we're at, and when I was still working with Crimson Trace, I had we did a demo, and I had a couple of SIGs, and I think I had 1 Glock, and I think I had a couple of revolvers that were out there, and it was typical. You know, we had some donated ammo, and you come up and you load and you shoot and play with the toys. And I had a parole officer parole officer from a neighboring state where they're certified peace officers. Come up and he's looking at all the guns sitting on the table and he goes, "Well, which one of these is the easiest one to shoot?" I said, "I don't know." So I handed him the SIG 226 and I said, "Probably this one." And so he loads it, or I handed him a magazine and the gun.
Right.
And I turn around, I'm talking to one of the guys from Surefire, and I look back and there's like 12 people waiting in line. I look at this guy and he's still standing there staring at my SIG. And I'm like, "Hey, through the earmuffs, is there a problem?" He goes, "Yeah, how do you make it work? What are the levers on the side for?"
Oh, wow.
Like the decocker. So we finally got him squared away, and that evening we had a cocktail hour, and I walked him and said, "Hey, you were just like joking at the range, right?" He goes, "No, I've shot a Glock in the academy, and I've never shot anything else in my entire career."
Right.
So
I don't know how to run a DASA decocker gun.
I've never seen hammers on guns before.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think that's a great point to say, for all of us, get out there and try other guns. Someone who bought their first gun as a Glock and then the second gun was a Glock, and they tell you, the best gun to own is a Glock. Well, I mean, Glocks are good guns.
Yeah, yeah.
But, maybe try some other things, learn to run other things, and they have really strong opinions about revolvers or 1911s, and they've, shot one.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't take much to get a little education on these things either.
Yeah.
I mean, a day trip to a Bass Pro or a Cabela's, walking the counter in there could spin you up. Go to a Sportsman's Warehouse and check things out.
Go to a range and rent a couple guns.
Rent a couple comes in those places where you've got ranges that'll do that. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, living close to Vegas, I know people don't go there to rent Glocks and SIGs. They go there to rent machine
Machine
things
guns,
like that.
yeah.
But
burn ammo.
Fun's fun. Right?
Well, thanks for watching. Are there any other questions I got to address here, KJ? I know we've been talking for a while.
I think we're fairly good on questions. We just had a Lego My Ego says his self-defense strategy is to avoid situations as much as possible, which is always...
Well, that's a good step one, yeah.
That's a good one.
We won't get into step 2 or 3 when you can't avoid it, but, that's not a bad strategy. Me too. That's my first strategy is to avoid that stuff if I can.
Absolutely.
Well, all right, Wes. Thanks for being here, man.
No, absolutely, loving it.
Appreciate it. But let's go shoot each other on Force and Force stuff.
Sure.
All right. Thanks for watching Gun Talk Live. See you later.